"Sign it," he said, "or lose everything your family has built for the past 40 years. Clara Ferri did not move. She sat across the table from a man she had met exactly once before tonight. A man who had the legal power to take her family's land with a single letter to the French administrator's office in Florence. A man the whole city called cold, ruthless, and not worth crossing. She looked at the paper in front of her. She looked at him. "This document says I will be your wife," she said. "It does not say anything about what I agree to feel." Duke Adriano Castellano was quiet for a long moment. He had not expected that. Nobody spoke to him this way. Not in Florence. Not anywhere. He picked up the pen and pushed it slowly across the table toward her. "No one is asking you to feel anything," he said. "Only to sign." Clara picked up the pen. What happened in that room in Florence on the night of the 14th of March, 1810, changed both their lives in ways neither of them was ready for. This story is a work of fiction set against a real historical background. The characters of Clara Ferri and Duke Adriano Castellano are entirely fictional. They are not based on any real person, living or dead. The events described in this story did not happen. However, the historical setting is real. Florence was under French-controlled administration in 1810 as part of the Kingdom of Italy under Napoleon Bonaparte. The Napoleonic Code and the legal instruments described in this story, including entailment clauses and the requirement for noble households to meet establishment conditions, were genuine features of the legal system applied across occupied Italian territories during this period. All historical references are included for educational purposes only and are presented in simplified form to support the storytelling. This story is suitable for all audiences. To understand what that pen meant in Clara's hand, you need to understand Florence in 1810. Florence was a proud city. Its noble families had held their land and their titles for generations. They answered to their own laws, their own courts, their own sense of order. But that had changed. Napoleon Bonaparte had reshaped Italy the way a man reshapes clay, without asking the clay what it wanted to become. By 1810, the Kingdom of Italy was under French control, and with French control came the Napoleonic Code. A new set of laws, written in Paris, applied in Florence. And they changed everything. Now here is something important for you to know, because this is real history, not just a story. Under the Napoleonic Code, property and titles in occupied Italian territories were subject to what was called an entailment clause. In plain words, if a noble family could not prove a clear legal line of inheritance, the French administrators had the right to review the ownership of that family's land. And if the review went badly, the land could be transferred to another noble house that held a competing deed. This was not rare. This happened to real families across northern Italy between 1800 and 1814. The law was not cruel by accident. It was designed to give the French-controlled administration power over old Italian noble houses without needing to fight them directly. Control the land, and you control the people on it. This is the world Clara Ferri was living in. Her family had owned 300 acres of olive groves and vineyards in the hills south of Florence for over 40 years. The land fed them, employed the people around them, and gave them their name in local society. It was not glamour. It was not great wealth. But it was theirs. 3 months ago, her cousin Luca, the last male in the direct ferry line, had accepted a commission as an officer under the French garrison and been sent to Spain. He was alive. He wrote letters. But under the entailment clause in the family's property deed, his absence triggered a legal review. The deed required a legitimate male heir present and registered in the household within a set period. Luca was gone. The clock had started. Clara's uncle Bernardo had sat with the administrator's letter for 4 days before he called her into the study. He placed it on the desk between them. He said nothing while she read it. When she finished, he told her there was a solution. The deed allowed for a marriage alliance with the nearest holding noble house as an alternative to a male heir. That house was the Castellano family. And the Castellano family meant one man. Duke Adriano Castellano. In Florence, his name did not need much explanation. He had inherited the dukedom at 22 when his father left behind a beautiful estate and enough debt to sink a merchant fleet. Adriano had spent the next 12 years paying every coin of it back. Quietly, precisely, without complaint and without weakness. People respected him the way they respect a locked door, from a distance, and without testing it. He did not attend events he did not need to attend. He did not make conversation that served no purpose. He ran his estate, his accounts, and his household with a discipline that left no room for disorder. The city called him cold. A few people called him cruel. Nobody called him a friend. Uncle Bernardo told Clara the arrangement was a decision to make. Let us stop here for a moment. Because what Bernardo said sounds fair. He said the decision was hers. But look at what had already been arranged before Clara was called into that room. The letter had been read. The legal options had been reviewed. The contact with the Castellano house had already been made. The only thing left was for Clara to agree. That is not a decision. That is the appearance of a decision. When someone hands you a situation they have already prepared and tells you that you're free to choose, but every real option except the one they want has already been removed, that is not freedom. It is the shape of freedom without the substance of it. This happens in real life too. It happens in families. It happens in workplaces. Someone presents you with a choice inside a box they have already built. And because they say the word choice, you feel responsible for what you agree to. Clara saw this clearly. She was not a woman who missed what was happening around her. But seeing it clearly did not give her more options. It simply meant she walked into the Palazzo Castellano that evening with her eyes open. Which is more than most people manage. The Palazzo Castellano was not built to make people feel comfortable. That was the first thing Clara noticed when she arrived that evening. The rooms were large and very well kept. The floors were clean stone. The furniture was expensive and old. But nothing in the house felt like it had been arranged for warmth. Everything had been arranged for order. She managed 40 minutes of the formal dinner before the conversation around the table. All of it about French military movements and the price of grain, gave her a headache she could no longer pretend she did not have. She excused herself and followed the quietest corridor she could find until she reached a room at the far end with a heavy door left slightly open. Floor-to-ceiling shelves. Books arranged by size and subject. One candle burning on the reading table. And no other person inside. She went in. She had been there perhaps 10 minutes when she heard footsteps in the corridor. They stopped at the door. Duke Adriano Castellano stood at the threshold. He did not knock, because it was his house. But he did not enter either, which told Clara something about him before he said a word. "This room is not part of the evening," he said. "I know," Clara said. "That is why I am here." He looked at her for a moment. Not with hostility. Not with welcome. With the careful attention of a man deciding whether a situation requires a response or simply an observation. Then he walked to the far bookshelf and reached up for a volume without looking. He did not search for it. He did not scan the titles. His hand went directly to it, the way your hand goes to a light switch in a room you have lived in for years. Clara noticed this. She did not say anything. But she noticed it. A man who reaches for a book in the dark of his own library without looking is a man who has spent a great deal of time alone in that room. That is not a small thing to know about a person. He sat down at the reading table across from her, set the book down without opening it, and said something she had not expected. "I owe you the complete truth," he said. "Not just the part your uncle was given." Clara waited. "The entailment on your family's land is real," he said. "And the marriage alliance is a legal solution. But I did not propose it only to help the Ferri family. I proposed it because I need it as much as you do." He told her plainly. His father had left the Castellano title in good legal standing but the estate itself in serious debt. Adriano had spent 12 years restoring the finances. But there was a second clause in the Castellano deed, one that had never mattered until now. The clause required the title holder to establish a legitimate household before the age of 35. Adriano would turn 35 in 4 months. Here is the history behind that clause, because this too is real. In 1810, under French-administered Italian law, a noble title was not simply inherited and held. It had to be maintained through what the law called evidence of establishment. This meant a recognized household, a registered family unit. The French administrators used this requirement to keep pressure on old Italian noble families. If a title could be challenged on the grounds that the holder had not met the establishment requirement, a legal petition from another branch of the family, even a distant one, could succeed. This was not theory. Across northern Italy during the Napoleonic period, several noble titles changed hands exactly this way. Not through battle. Not through crime. Through paperwork. Adriano had a cousin, a man named Fausto, who had been watching the Castellano title for years and had recently filed a formal petition with the French administrator's office in Florence. The petition argued that Adriano, having no household and no registered family, had failed to meet the establishment requirement. If the petition succeeded, Fausto would take the Castellano title and the land. So you see, Adriano said, this is not a rescue. I am not offering you shelter while asking for nothing in return. I need a registered marriage to defend my own title. You need the marriage alliance to protect your family's land. We are in the same position. Clara sat with that. In all the weeks since her uncle had shown her the administrator's letter, nobody had spoken to her this directly. Nobody had given her the full picture without softening it first or shaping it into something easier to swallow. This man, this cold, precise, reportedly cruel man that all of Florence kept at arm's length, had just sat across a table from her and told her the truth when he was not required to. She did not know yet what to do with that. But she did not forget it. The dinner ended. The guests left in their carriages. The sound of hooves on stone faded down the road and the Palazzo Castellano went quiet. Clara was shown to a small sitting room near the entrance to wait for the carriage that would take her back to her uncle's house. A servant lit 2 candles and left her alone. She was still sitting there, turning everything over in her mind, when Adriano appeared in the doorway. He did not sit down. He stood at the edge of the room as though he was not sure whether entering was the right decision. There is something else you need to know, he said. Clara looked at him. Fausto's petition, he said. It is moving faster than I expected. I was told this evening that the French administrator has agreed to review it within 3 weeks. If a registered marriage is not in place before that review is completed, the petition succeeds by default. 3 weeks. They had been speaking in terms of months. A gradual arrangement. Time to think, time to prepare. 3 weeks changed all of that. Clara did not panic. She had learned a long time ago that panic was a feeling, not a plan, and feelings without plans solved nothing. So she sat with a new number and let her mind work through it the way it always did, quietly, without rushing. She thought about the land. 300 acres. 40 years of her family's work pressed into that soil. People who lived and worked on that estate. Her uncle Bernardo, who had managed it with care and without complaint his entire adult life. She thought about Fausto, a man she had never met, using a legal process to take something that had never been his, simply because the law allowed him to try. She thought about Adriano sitting across a reading table in a library he had retreated to since he was a boy, telling her the truth about his own position when he could easily have left that part out. He could have told her only what she needed to hear to agree. Many men would have done exactly that. Instead, he had given her the complete picture, including the parts that made him look less like a rescuer and more like a man in trouble himself. That was not nothing. In a city built on appearance and social performance, honesty was not the easiest thing to offer. It cost something. And Adriano had offered it to her freely, on the same night they were meant to be deciding whether to enter a legal agreement together. Clara made her decision. We should not wait for a more convenient arrangement, she said. If 3 weeks is what we have, Then 3 weeks is what we work with. Adriano was still. You understand what you are agreeing to, he said. It was not quite a question. I understand it completely, Clara said. That is why I am agreeing to it. Now let us be clear about something, because this moment matters. At the beginning of this story, Clara's uncle told her the decision was hers, but had already made the arrangements before she entered the room. That was a false choice. The appearance of freedom without the real thing. This moment is different. Clara has said no before. In her own mind, several times, in the weeks between the letter and this evening. She has looked at this arrangement from every angle and she knows what it will cost her. She is not agreeing because she has run out of options. She is agreeing because she has looked at the full picture, including the parts nobody else told her, and she has decided that this is where she is willing to spend her choice. That is what a real decision looks like. Not the absence of fear. Not the absence of loss. But a clear-eyed yes after a clear-eyed look at everything. Sacrifice is not the same as surrender. Clara was not giving up. She was choosing, deliberately, fully informed, and on her own terms. Adriano looked at her for a long moment. Something moved behind his eyes that his face did not quite carry. He did not name it. Neither did she. Then we begin tomorrow, he said quietly. Clara nodded once. Outside, her carriage had arrived. She could hear it on the stone below. She stood, straightened her dress, and walked toward the door. She paused at the threshold, the same place Adriano had stood an hour ago, deciding whether to enter. She did not look back. But for the first time since her uncle had placed that letter on the desk, the weight she had been carrying felt like something she had chosen to carry. Not something dropped on her without warning. There is a difference between a burden placed on you and a weight you pick up yourself. Clara Ferri had just learned what that difference felt like. They were married on a Wednesday morning. The ceremony took place at a small chapel in the hills above Florence. There were no grand preparations. No long guest list. Uncle Bernardo was there. Adriano's estate steward stood as a witness. 2 officials from the French administrator's office attended to ensure the registration was completed correctly and filed the same day. The whole thing was finished before midday. By early afternoon, Clara was inside the Palazzo Castellano as its legal mistress. Not as a guest this time. Not as a woman waiting for a carriage home. As someone who now had her name written beside Adriano's in the official household register of the Kingdom of Italy. It was a strange feeling. Not bad. Not good. Simply new. That evening, a servant showed Clara to her chambers, a large, well-kept room in the east wing of the palazzo. Separate from Adriano's. This had been agreed. It was part of the arrangement. A formal marriage in legal terms, with the understanding that everything else would find its own pace, or would not, and neither of them would pretend otherwise. After the servant left, Clara sat by the window for a long time. Outside, the hills south of Florence were dark and very still. Somewhere out there, 300 acres of olive groves and vineyards were still standing. Still belonging, in every practical sense, to the people who had worked them for 40 years. She had done what she came to do. Later that evening, she found that the connecting sitting room between their 2 chambers had a fire already lit. 2 chairs. A small table. And on the table, a single candle and a book she had not put there. She picked it up. It was the same volume Adriano had reached for without looking in the library the night before. He had left it there for her without a note. Without an explanation. Without making anything of it at all. She sat down in one of the chairs and opened it. A few minutes later, she heard his door. Footsteps. Then Adriano came into the sitting room, stopped when he saw her, and sat down in the other chair without a word. He picked up the papers he had brought with him and began to read. She continued with the book. The fire crackled. Outside, Florence carried on without them. And in that small room, 2 people who had agreed to share a legal arrangement sat in chairs on opposite sides of a fire and did not speak. And somehow, without either of them planning it, the silence was not uncomfortable at all. Clara did not know what this marriage would become. She did not know if the cold, careful man across the room would stay cold and careful, or whether 12 years of building walls around himself had left any room for something else to grow. She did not know yet. But she thought about the book on the table, left without a word. And she thought that a man who speaks through small gestures when he cannot speak through words is a man worth watching. She turned a page. He turned one too. Before we go, let us talk about what this story was really about. It was not about a woman who had no choice. Clara had choices. She looked at every single one of them carefully and she chose the hardest one, not because she was forced to, but because she decided it was worth it. That is sacrifice. Not giving up something because you have no option left. Giving up something because you have looked honestly at the full picture and decided that what you're protecting matters more than what you're letting go. And Adriano, a man who had spent 12 years keeping every person at a safe distance. Not because he was cruel. Because he had learned, the hard way, that closeness costs something. He told Clara the truth on the night they met, the complete truth, including the parts that made him look weak. And in doing that, he gave her the one thing that actually mattered. The chance to choose him properly. Not because of a legal clause. Not because of land or titles. But because he treated her like someone capable of handling the truth. In any relationship, not just in 1810 Florence, but right now, in your life. The person who tells you the full truth when it would have been easier to tell you less is someone worth paying attention to. Remember that. If this story kept you watching until the very end, then you already know what comes next matters. Subscribe to this channel so you do not miss what happens between Clara and Adriano when the arrangement becomes something neither of them planned for. The next chapter is coming, and it begins exactly where the comfortable silence ended. I created this story because we often forget that behind the polished stone floors and formal dinner tables of 1810 Florence, there were real people living inside rules they never chose. This narrative was inspired by the real legal tensions of the Napoleonic Code as it was applied across occupied Italian territories in the early 19th century. During this period, your family name and your property deed were everything. If the legal ground shifted beneath you, and under French administration, it shifted often. You did not just lose land. You lost your place in the entire social order. I wanted to explore Clara not as a woman being rescued, but as a woman making a calculated sacrifice with full knowledge of what it cost her. And I wanted to show Adriano not as a powerful man offering charity, but as someone equally trapped, holding a title that paperwork alone could strip from him. What stays with me is this. Both of them were caught in systems they did not build. And yet the one thing neither system could legislate was the choice to be honest with each other. This story is a small tribute to the people history does not record, the ones who made hard decisions quietly, in rooms with no audience, and carried the weight of those decisions without ceremony. True strength has never been about what you hold. It has always been about what you are willing to let go.